Welcome to the Emergent Human, where we explore optimizing health, embodied spirituality, and post-conventional living. I'm Michael Ostrolenk, a therapist, coach, educator, and I'm your host. I'd like to do a shout out to my coach and teacher, Amanda Jade Fiorini. She wrote a wonderful piece entitled Grief as an Ally of Emergence, which I'll include in the show notes, which is a really timely piece for me personally. For those listeners who have children, grandchildren, are coaches or mentors to kids, let me encourage you to check out Natural Learning Relationships, which is a Facebook group. You can learn how nurturing children development can lead to your adult development, and you can find them on Facebook. Today's show is brought to you by Somatic Psychotherapy Today. Today's guest is Dr. Leslie Ellis. Dr. Ellis is a leading expert in the use of somatic approaches in psychotherapy, in particular for working with dreams, nightmares, and the effects of trauma. She is the author of A Clinician's Guide to Dream Therapy and offers many training opportunities in embodied experiential dream work based on her book. She has a PhD in clinical psychology from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology with a specialization in somatic approaches. Dr. Ellis has a master's from the Pacific Graduate Institute and worked as a therapist in private practice in Vancouver, British Columbia for more than 20 years. Her approach to therapy combines Jungian and focus oriented techniques. She was adjunct faculty at Adler University, where she taught clinical skills and developed a trauma course for the Masters of Counseling program. She is a certified coordinator and vice president of the International Focusing Institute. How are you doing, Leslie?
Oh, I'm doing really well, thanks. I'm happy to be here.
I'm very happy to have you. Congratulations on your new book.
Thank you.
Very exciting. I thought one way we could get into this conversation is that you had two formative experiences that you used dream work to kind of unpack and do a deep dive into. And I thought might be there is where we could kind of start this conversation.
Yes, I've had many stunning dreams, but there's one in particular that stands out to me. And I was, at the time I had this dream, I was doing my master's in counseling at Pacifica, where the focus was on Jungian depth approaches. And so uh, we were all really in this class. We had a lovely connected cohort, and we were all really excited by it. It was new, and we were very excited by our dreams and dream work. And I had been seeing a Jungian analyst, and I had this dream that was extremely. I mean, dreams tend to go deep, but this one really touched on some of the most profound experiences of my life and brought them together in one image. So the image was of me as a baby in a glass box, and I'm going down a rushing river and being pulled into a whirlpool. And I wake up because it's just so visceral. I feel myself being sucked down. And so this tied basically two near-death experiences that I had in my life. The first was when I was born. I was very premature, 2 months premature. I weighed only 3 pounds, and I was really not expected to survive. And I know that my conscious memories of that are of course not existent, but I do think my body has a deep recollection of that very difficult, lonely start in life. I think it marked me in a lot of ways. I'm a kind of a loner. And then when I was 17, I nearly drowned in this big whitewater pool in a creek up in the hills, the mountains behind here. Friends and I used to go there in the summer and drink beer and lay in the sun. And this day I decided, at the prompting of my friend, and I was always up for a dare, to dive under the waterfall that emptied into this pool. And he said if you went down, 3 or 4 feet, there was a sort of a calm patch, and you could swim under and come out on the other side. So I tried that, but I didn't get far enough under the current, and so I got pulled down by it, way down. I honestly, it got past the point of needing air, and was convinced I was going to die in that pool. And the strange thing was, even at 17, I just finished high school and was off, to start my life. And you'd think this would be about the worst time to have your life. And I, in that time in the pool, I actually kind of became peaceful about it. I accepted it. And then, and then I had this, some of the classic near-death experience stories. Like I felt presence, I saw light, I felt peaceful, I felt like I had a choice. And obviously I chose to swim back up. I never lost consciousness, but this just had a deep, profound impact on me. And so this dream itself was tying the two experiences together in an image that kind of incorporates both. And I worked with this dream with my therapist, who was a Jungian analyst who also really worked with embodied experiential approaches. And we revisited this dream, and he, in the session, kind of pulled me out, like actually grabbed my hand, which he never would do normally. He was very much the, follow the frame of therapy and not touching your client. But this one time he made an exception, and it felt like he reached back all the way to my past, to that little baby that was so alone. It really felt like a visceral reaching through time. I can't really, I mean, I'm telling you the story, but I don't think I can really convey the power of it. I can just tell you that it changed me at a very deep, visceral level. And it made me realize that the power of dreams is profound, and that dreams access a deeper layer, and they're always trying to help us move through things and forward. And it I had already been really interested in working with dreams, and felt like this is an excellent way to approach psychotherapy. But this experience just made it so much more compelling to me.
Before we get into the therapeutic uses of dreams, which you lay out really nicely in your book, would you say that the second near death experience you had under the water, did that kind of initiate your interest in dreams, psychology, Jung, body work? Like where did all those interests emerge from?
It might have been an initiation. At the time, I wasn't really aware of that. I was, just really just a teenager, not even aware. I mean, I was interested in my dreams and sort of interested in just life's mysteries, I guess. But, it didn't really surface until much later. I did have a lucid dream. One of my very first lucid dream was of being underwater. So it was kind of a
Wow.
continuation a little bit of that experience, because I was underwater in this dream, and I realized I was not having any trouble breathing. I was not needing air, and it reminded me of getting to that state where I didn't need it. But then I realized I was dreaming, and then the whole scene just became so much more intense, and it was vivid, and it was fun. And I was reading the Harry Potter books at the time, I think to my daughter, or maybe it was just for myself. And so I was like I was in the lake where they're looking for they're rescuing their friend, or where they all had quests where they're under the lake, and except not as creepy as that. It was a little bit more fun. And so I just, that I don't frequently lucid dream, but that was a whole, like when you wake up in your dream, it has this other level of intensity, and it feels so real. And so it's another thing that made me interested in dreams. But I really got into it kind of after university. I was working as a journalist, and I did that for about 10 years, actually, writing about science. And then I just started, getting into personal growth and interested in dreams, particularly with friend groups, and going on retreats that were, sort of more personal exploration, and decided I needed a career change. I wanted to really have my work be go a little bit deeper into these kinds of more personal and spiritual realms. And so I went to Pacifica, and watched some of the masters of dream work and active imagination there, like Lionel Corbett and Stephen Eisenstadt and James Hillman. And these were great mentors. And so that's where my interest was really, met with teachers and systems that could actually make me able to apply this with clients, with psychotherapy patients.
How did you get into a more somatic approach to your work in general, and then focusing in particular?
So I think part of it is I've always been very much into my body. I've been an athlete all my life, and so I just feel like the ways of meeting the world and listening to the world through my body has been pretty much something I've naturally done. And then when I finished at Pacifica, I was pregnant with my daughter Grace, and so I couldn't go into practice right away. So I wanted to study some more and just keep my mind into something relevant. And so I took a focusing therapy program, a 2-year program, and it it is a way of working with the body that's it developed by Eugene Genlin, that is very rich and deep and subtle, and it really I think complements the way I do dream work so well. So I studied it deeply, and I started my practice kind of with those two skill sets already. And I think a lot of my students come to the body later when they come up against certain limitations, especially working with implicit trauma, things that happened before your memories were really clear and solid, or just when trauma is dissociated and we don't recall it. And so focusing and accessing the embodied states is a way to get at things that otherwise I think are not accessible. And I feel comfortable in that realm. I think it might be, partly just because of the way I started my life. I kind of ended up, being thrown onto my own internal resources right away. And I've always been just interested in that whole inner world. It really feels to me like it's got so much richness and vastness, as big as the outer world. And that I find, I guess I encounter a lot of, ways that it's devalued in our current culture. And so I feel like this way of going in is, it's for me like coming home. And in my work, I feel like it's what gets, if people come to therapy, they don't always know the way forward. That's why they're there. And this is the missing piece, is that you can think your way through something and go round and round in circles, but the body will have another take, and somewhat of a broader take. And so accessing that, learning how to do that was I feel lucky that I learned it right away, and so that I could just start my practice with embodied practices. And I would never now do it without that listening to the body as part of it. It feels like it's just crucial to getting to what really matters and what's really true for people.
Well, I definitely hope it's a future piece of the future world of psychology and psychiatry. Because I like to say that most of therapeutic approaches are from the top of the crown of the head to the jawline. That kind of stops
Yes.
there.
Yes, I
If even
agree.
that,
I
unfortunately.
agree. And that is, I mean, not that cognitive approaches are, there's some usefulness to it, but
Of
we
course.
obviously, don't live from the neck up. Our whole body's involved, and our mind can fool us and lie to us. And, people can get into trouble that way, or just get into endless loops. Whereas the body is much more is grounded and authentic. And I find that your head is more likely to lead you wrong than your body.
Right. You won't get any arguments from me. So, in your book, A Clinician's Guide to Dream Therapy, Implementing Simple and Effective Dream Work, you lay out various reasons why engaging a client in the dream process is very helpful. I'm just going to name a few, and then I would love for you to kind of break some of those down, if that's
Sure.
okay.
Yeah, of course.
Um, they help point out salient emotional concerns. They bypass internal editing. Also, as you point out in the book, the prefrontal cortex is offline.
Mhm.
They can provide new perspectives on issues, and they can be a diagnostic tool, including for physical illnesses, which I think is amazing to think about. But why don't we start to just the first one? They point out, they can help point out the most salient emotional concerns the individual brings to the therapeutic process.
Yeah, they seem to cut to the chase, and part of it is backed by what we can now see, what the dream researchers are finding when they look at what's happening in the brain during dreaming. And it's implicated in emotional regulation and memory consolidation. So the idea is that dreams are picking up the things that have got a rise out of us during the day, that have got an emotional reaction, even if it's a not something we noticed consciously. But it's, I think, part of what the emotional system's doing is flagging what's important. When we get an emotional response to something, that means we want to remember it. It's important. It has meaning to us. And our we have a million things coming at us all day. We can't recall them all. That would be just impossible. And so how do we select what we're going to remember? This is really well understood, that emotions increase our ability to remember something. If it's got an emotional charge, we will recall it. We're way more likely to recall it well. So dreaming seems to be part of that process of taking the things that have this emotional charge and then laying that piece of the experience into an associative network, so we can pull it back when we need it. And nobody knows for sure, but this is a plausible theory about what we're doing when we're dreaming. And that means that the content of dreaming are those things that are important to us, that we need to process. And they're also showing that when we do that, when we process it and lay it down in our memories in a way that's accessible, that then the emotional charge dissipates as if it's done its job. And so it's regulating our emotions and creating memories of things that matter. So when we pay attention to what we're dreaming about, we're actually augmenting those processes, which sound very much like therapy, where you go and process emotion that hasn't been fully metabolized, and then it becomes part of your memory, as opposed to something current that keeps cropping up in ways that aren't helpful. And so I feel like the dreams are such a useful tool that way for therapists, because they help you select, with the client, what is truly important in their psyche, in their emotional system, what is brewing. And very often it's those things that we repress, so they're just under the surface. There's stuff that we may not otherwise want to look at. They're like the good friend that tells you the tough things to hear, but those things, you always feel better for having worked through them. So dreams are just a great way to, I think, initiate what we pay attention to in our therapy.
We similarly joked about living just inside of your head between the ears
Yes.
and its limitations. And let me narrow that down to the rational mind, the prefrontal cortex, because in your book you do talk about how dreams, that part of the brain is quote unquote offline. So
Yes.
we're not editing out
Hmm.
experiences through the kind of the rational mind process. Can you speak a little bit of that and how important that really is?
Yes. Oh, I could say so much about that. Let me see how I can kind of pare it down a little bit. So in dreaming, they've dream researchers have looked at what is going on in the brain when we're dreaming, and that yes, the prefrontal cortex is way dampened down. So we don't have access to a lot of our ability to record memories. So most of our dreams are forgotten, except when we're kind of crossing the sleep sleep-wake barrier, or if we can become lucid in our dreams, we tend to forget most of what we dream about. But we also lose our ability to process in a logical way. Time sequences get out of sync, and all of those are really just indications that the researchers are right, that executive functioning in our brain is not on. And what it does instead is that the emotional limbic system and the visual cortex, those are operating, and your emotional system is actually more active in dreaming, in REM dreaming, than when you're awake. So there's another way of sort of being that is more in the moment, more holistic, more visual, kind of often associated with right hemisphere functioning. And it is a kind of a freely associative, hyper associative state that links things that aren't normally put together, but that have a relevance. So there's this really creative process that unfolds, and the sort of waking mind, the logical focused mind, really just gets in the way of that. It will criticize it. It will just kind of make fun of it. It will make fun of our dreams and say they're meaningless. And so I feel like dreaming kind of gets that critic and that editor out of the way. It's useful to have, in certain circumstances and after the fact. But
Mm-hmm.
when we're just processing freely, it's really good to have just that open kind of creative flow that can happen in those states. And you can enter those kind of states also when you're awake, which I often encourage when I'm working with people's dreams, is to re-enter a little bit more of a liminal state that bypasses or quiets down that editor. And that's part of the process of really getting the value from dreams, is to shift into the more embodied, right shifted state, where these things, this is the sort of their natural home, and where they're valued. And I feel like a lot of times the people that tend to devalue dreams or things that are from the implicit realm, or that are really hard to quantify, are coming from this very much sort of left hemisphere logical place, which is a way of thinking, but not the only way. And I'll recommend a book by Ian McGilchrist called The Master and His Emissary, that talks about this in great detail. But I think that that letting the editor just be quiet and still for a while, and opening up to this other way of thinking and being, is really generative and creative. And if you're stuck on something, this is like coming at it from a whole new perspective, and dreams do that.
The way you just described it, and then you also talked about the fact that you can actually access those states while, in quote unquote, awake, reminds me of the sacred medicine use. It's very similar. Uh,
Hmm?
so it's fascinating. You talked about the right hemisphere, left hemisphere, and it's interesting how each of those hemispheres show up culturally. And you pointed out that people who disbelieve the value of dreams to a certain extent might be more left hemisphere, in quotes, oriented. Um, and in your book, you talk about right hemisphere as being one kind of cultural phenomenon would be indigenous communities, who are
Yes.
seemingly much more right hemispherically oriented, communal, open, emotional. And I don't mean emotional in a bad way, but open to emotions and connections and stuff like that, as opposed to linear and rational. So it's fascinating to think about dreams from that perspective as well.
Yes, there's definitely a very big difference in how one views dreams depending on your cultural orientation. And I do want to say, like, the left right hemisphere, I think of it more as a metaphor, because there is some truth to it, but it's so much an oversimplification
Yeah.
that, but it
Yeah.
is a way of thinking or being. And indigenous cultures, or what they would call like polyphasic cultures, value dreams as if they are also a real they're real life. They're not just a fantasy world. They're a real world with its own rules of engagement, and in some ways more important. I mean, there are famously the Aborigines in Australia, for example, that think of dream time as a very real realm, and that if someone has a dream in that culture, they immediately bring it to the community. And the dream is not about the person and their own personal issues and and their life. It's actually something that may be important for the community or important for the world. And I think dreams can be all of those things. Dreams can be personal, they can be transpersonal, they can be all of those things at the same time. But our culture, I mean, North American culture, is very much um, seems biased toward the empirical, what you see and what you can touch, what you can measure is true, and the rest of it is suspect, is kind of how I see our cultural bias.
Mhm.
And so it doesn't really, that viewpoint doesn't really value dreams. Although even there, I would say, because there's been some research that I've just referred to about understanding that dreams have this useful way of metabolizing emotions and laying down memory, that even those who might dismiss sort of more mysterious and magical aspects of dreaming will say that there is something useful about them anyway, or evolution would have not selected for them. We would have stopped dreaming if it wasn't doing something important for us.
Yeah, you do discuss that in your book, because you point out different theorists, practitioners, clinicians, and researchers, who have different theories on the dreams. And you talked about kind of the evolutionary biological understanding of it. Let me have you go back. You mentioned individual and or transpersonal in orientation in terms of a dream. A dream could be both. You mentioned Eisenstadt,
Hmm?
and in his work, he not only talks about the individual or the collective unconscious, but also the entire natural world, which
Yes.
I think is awesome, because I usually only hear the collective unconscious of the individual. I just never, I shouldn't say it's never. I've never had the experience of reading into or listening to too many people talk about kind of the biospheric space for dreams to emerge, or the
Yes.
ecological.
Yeah, this is what Stephen Eisenstadt is famous for, is that he added a layer to Jung's idea of there's the personal, waking conscious, and then the unpersonal unconscious, and then the collective unconscious, which includes what Jung would call the archetypes, or the experiences common to us all. Like, for example, the experience of mother is an archetypal experience. And then Stephen Eisenstadt went one step beyond and said there is a world unconscious that is really he would say through dreaming that the world is speaking to us and through us. And so if we dream about the whales, for example, it's not about our relationship to a whale or what a whale means to us. It's the whales basically calling to us through our dreams. And that if we have a dream like that, then it behooves us to think about not how the dream can serve us, but how we can serve the dream. And he has examples that he gives of people who've dreamt of various, like one man who dreamt about a church that ended up being a real place in Mexico that he went to, and the church was in ruins. And this man, as part of his life project, raised the money to restore this place. And
That's
so
cool.
so it's that kind of thing. And I had a dream about trees after that, like a forest that was charred and dying. And I felt like, oh, these are the trees dreaming through me. The trees, need attention. And I've had some quite magical experiences happen since then, or when I'm in that mode. I've had animals come up to me, wild animals, and literally seem like they're talking to me, although I don't understand what they're saying. But it feels like that realm it's there, and dreams are like a window into it. And I feel like I've only brushed the surface, but this is Stephen Eisenstadt's real gift, and he's worked with a lot of indigenous communities to really understand their take on dreaming.
Well, that's actually a great segue to another area, that dreams can be useful in a therapeutic process, because you talk about it can provide new perspectives on issues. Now, you weren't talking about individual personal issues, but obviously everything you just laid out are new perspectives on the world. But can you
Yes.
speak to like how they can provide new perspectives for you as an individual, not necessarily collective unconsciously or at the the Gaia mind?
Right. Well, there are so many ways, but I think one of my real favorite ways of using dreams to bring new perspectives is to try on the subjective experience of various aspects of our dreams. So you can do this with any dream. It doesn't have to be something big and momentous, but it could be that you dream of, just an ordinary object or person or some little narrative. And what's really a very effective, reliably effective way of getting a new perspective is to embody those things in your dream that feel very foreign, the things you don't like, the things that feel like they're not you. There's a Gestalt idea that everything in the dream is actually an aspect of yourself.
Right.
I'm not sure if I mean, I put lots of these ideas out there. I don't know if I believe every single one of them, but I like to try them on. I'm the kind of person who believes everything until it's proven wrong, as opposed to disbelieving everything until it's proven right. So I'm open to trying all of these things.
That's awesome.
And yeah, and this idea that the dream represents aspects of ourselves that are in our, hidden or unknown, is really a way of enlarging your consciousness. And Robert Bosnick, a Jungian, another
Mhm.
Jungian, his work is quite famous for this particular aspect of entering into, or making what he would call making a transit into a dream object, and becoming, say, you could become the monster in your dream, the thing you're most afraid of. And I've done this with people who have nightmares that have had the similar kind of attacker come back, and when they it takes some courage, I will say, but when they embody this attacker, very often what happens is they get a completely different take. They think, oh, this person actually didn't mean me harm. They're just trying to make me see this, or they're trying to do X or Y, something different than they expect. And then the fear dissipates from the dream. It becomes a completely different dream. And it's really transformative. I think um, the more, the further you go toward the edge of what feels like the other, and the more you can enter into that experience and truly embody it and be, in real empathy with it, the more you're naturally gonna, it makes sense, right? That your consciousness will expand because you're trying on ideas and ways of being that you would consider foreign. And even if you don't adopt that whole hog, which I don't necessarily recommend, but it stretches you a little, you start to go, oh, okay, there's another way to see this. This isn't how I thought. And we often identify in dreams with the dream ego, which is our avatar in our dream, but I don't think equates directly to us as a person. The dream ego is often persecuted and tortured and not having a good time. And I think the dream ego is more related often to our persona and the face we show to the world. And that when that's threatened, our dreams will be scary, but that's actually potentially heralding a kind of shift in how we are in the world that is threatening to our ego, but maybe not to our whole person, if
A
that makes
very
sense.
transpersonal perspective, I would say.
Mm, yeah.
Bosniak's work is called embodied imagination, correct?
Yes.
Okay, just so folks can check it out if they so
Hmm.
choose. Another area you talk about is dreams as a diagnostic tool, which I think anyone who's alive should listen to this piece of it for sure. But also, I think it'd be fascinating if our medical um, um, education included this for doctors, nurses, other healthcare practitioners, because I think it could not revolutionize medicine, because there's a whole bunch of other areas of medicine that needs to be reformed, but could help inform the medical profession down the road. But can you speak to at least that specific thing? And you can give other examples of dreams as a diagnostic tool too, not just physical illness.
Yeah. So what I think is that uh, because dreams have access to our unconscious, to our bodies, that they pick up on earlier subtle cues that might be really not accessible to us in waking, when we're awake. And some people just don't really have a deep connection with their bodies. But Oliver Sacks is, very famous writer and psychologist who would be able to tell. He said one of his clients was able to tell when they were about to have a seizure because their dreams would be red and normally they were black and white. And he would say that, the dreams are pointing to things that are really there, but that are subtle. And I have an example from, this is also my book, but I took this one from Jeremy Taylor, the late Jeremy Taylor, who was a beloved group dream worker. And he talked about in a dream group how a woman had a dream of this a purse full of rotting meat, which was so disgusting and so impactful. And she took it to her dream group, and they were horrified as well, and said, you really need to go and check this out. And so she went to the doctor to get a diagnosis, and they said there was nothing wrong with her. And so she went back again and had a really aggressive form of cancer, uterine cancer, that would have killed her. She was about to leave on a long trip, and if she had left, she said she would not have survived that trip. And it was the dream that made her not just go for one a diagnostic test, but another one, because the dream was it was just so powerful and felt like such a warning. And it was, in fact, really, it saved her life. She credits it for saving her life. And there are lots of stories like this where dreams can point to parts of the body that might need attention. And that they're really, it's worth checking out. So there's at the level of the physical realm, a lot of dream workers I know will say that dreams always contain some body analogy. And there are certain kinds of dreams that are precursors to certain illnesses. So it is useful at that level. And there is also a way that dreams can be diagnostic in terms of your psyche, in terms of psychological issues. And so nightmares, for example, are related to unmetabolized trauma. And as they start to change, the trauma will also shift. And they can be not just diagnostic, but also show that you're having some impact. They can map the path to recovery. And I think that it's really difficult to generalize about what a dream means and what it is saying. But if you work with dreams over time, like this dream group with this woman, if she'd had dreams like that every week, they might not have been so alarmed. But if you watch the pattern of your dreaming, is that your dog?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you watch the pattern of your dreaming over time, then when something really shifts, it's a signal to say, pay attention to this and explore what it might mean. And, I've had really, the way dreams tell things isn't always direct, because we don't have access to the part of our brain that kind of just says it in a real concrete way. So we do have to decipher them. And I think the best thing to do is track your dreams over time. And if it shifts into something that really feels like it's trying to get our attention, we'll probably repeat it as well. Then to, just follow it up and see if it really is trying to say something. Sometimes houses can be body analogies, for example, like windows can be eyes, and wiring can be your nervous system, and plumbing can be your digestive system. And sometimes that maps onto your body, and is a way to kind of just to check something out if it feels like the dream is telling you something's wrong. Usually you'll also get an intuitive sense that, oh, this is important. Like the woman with the uterine cancer, she had a real strong sense that this dream was a warning, and it was.
Would you say that Otto Mandel is kind of the exemplar, his approach, process psychology, process work, of seeing the body as a diagnostic tool, especially the physical body in this case?
Yes, I wish I'd worked more deeply with his work. I've always been fascinated by him and his way of seeing the dream and the body as really always in process, always linked. And yeah, I would say he's one of not only him, but I mean, Stephen Eisenstadt and Robert Bosnick, who we've already mentioned, also talk about imagination in medicine. And Mendel's work, I think, is maybe takes it a step further, because he says that we are just literally always in that process, that we are, but that when we're awake, what we would call awake, that we're out of touch with it. We're not in the dreaming, but that it's always there. And if we shift into a sort of the dreaming state, then we would be more naturally aware of all that's going on in our body. And I think it's accessible to us. I think, for example, that as a woman, why I would need to take a diagnostic test to know I'm pregnant. And I think, well, if I was really in touch with my body, that would be something that would be immediately apparent, something as momentous as that. So I feel like as a culture, maybe it is possible to be more in touch with our physical bodies, and maybe the dreaming can help us to do that.
And I love in your book how you talk a lot about metaphor,
Mm-hmm.
and how important it is, and how the body speaks to the conscious mind through metaphor. Not always direct, not like necessarily in English. If you're an English speaker with straight words, sometimes it's metaphoric, sometimes it's symbolic. And maybe now might be a nice time to talk about the different types of dreams that can show up in people's lives. And you list in your book quite a few different ones, but maybe let's pick a handful. You talk about big dreams, you talk about lucid dreams, and precognitive dreams. Talk a little bit about big dreams.
Yeah. So big dreams would be like the example I gave you at the beginning of my dream of
Hmm.
my near-death experiences tied into one image. And so these are dreams that, I mean, a lot of times we'll wake up and our dreams will be kind of fuzzy, and we'll go, I know I dreamt something, and all I remember is this little piece. And big dreams are not like that. Big dreams are, they're very clear and vivid and memorable. And you wake up from them uh, going, oh my goodness, this is important. This means something. I need to pay attention to this. And they do feel like they have a transpersonal element. So they're much bigger than we are. And there's a feeling of awe that comes with them. And people may only have, one dream like this in a lifetime. But what I know about these dreams is that people will carry them with them for their lifetime, and that they keep evolving. And I've worked with some big dreams that I remember one recent one in particular, where a woman came to me with this dream that she'd been carrying around for about 10 years, and was just as vivid as the day she dreamt it. And when we worked through she knew that it was a very important message, an important way that she needed to look at her life. And it had to do with her relationship with her mother, which is a big archetypal relationship for us all. And she also seemed to have this intuitive sense that maybe she wasn't ready to process what it contained when she had the dream, because she literally waited for 10 years. But when she worked with it, it was as if it was yesterday. The details were vivid, and it brought a profound shift in her way of seeing her that very formative relationship, and its place in her life. And it enabled her to move forward. And I think that big dreams can have that personal dimension, but then they also carry a larger message, I think, that can be more universally applicable than maybe the more everyday dreams. And so that's one type of dream. And Jung coined this phrase, and it really, I feel like also toward the end of life, people often have big dreams that help them with that transition, the end of life transition. And that's a whole realm of study that some people sort of specifically working with dreams at the end of life, because they take on a different quality, a more spiritual quality. So there's big dreams, and then you asked about precognitive dreams, which are dreams that appear to predict the future. And a lot of people report having these. And it's interesting because I just read a book called When Brains Dream that is about, it's written by a couple of very long-term, very highly respected dream researchers who are very much looking at the history of scientific research into dreams. But they, in their book, say that that precognitive dreams are our thing. And it's because in their theory, what we're doing when we're dreaming is we're actually exploring the possibilities. We have all of these memories and events in our life, and the things that we're conscious of and the things we're not conscious of, but that are part of our memory network. And when we're dreaming, we're trying out all the possibilities of what could happen next. And so sometimes we hit on the right thing, the thing that will happen. And then of course that will be memorable. And they say, so he said so they're saying it's kind of a hit and miss thing, which may or may not be true, but there's a lot of, sort of anecdotes about people dreaming of things that are going to happen. And it's true that our unconscious has more information than what we're consciously aware of. We can't hold all of the things that we remember and see, but it seems as though somehow our dreams have access to everything that we've seen, even if it was just a quick glimpse, and everything that's maybe possible from that. So our dreams are pulling from a massive palette, and that they can, project into the future seems like it would make sense, because they're trying to help us prepare for the future. Our brains are like a massive pattern recognition device, according to some neuroscientists. So if we're trying to recognize patterns, then we can also predict in some ways. Of course, it's not something you can entirely rely on. You only know that it's a precognitive dream after the fact, when something that you dreamt about does happen. But I think that there is a way that dreams can predict. And so that's a very fascinating realm of dreaming. And then,
It strikes me that psychic powers aside, or transpersonal aside, if you just look at animals, many animals, if you pay attention to them, will know in advance of some kind of natural disaster.
yes.
Well, we have animal bodies. Why wouldn't we know at some very subtle levels the same thing? We don't pay attention to it necessarily because we're not so embodied, but it might show up through the dream
Yeah.
because the body is trying to share with you for evolutionary reasons, for survival. Like, hey, pay attention, something's going to happen.
Yes, I agree. I think that we tend to be over reliant on the senses that, especially what we see. But there are other senses, like we have in focusing in the body, we have interoception. We have a sense of ourselves from the inside, which is, something that I think is a sense that is undeveloped in a lot of people, that gives a lot of information. And then the physicists would say there's like many different senses or realms that are they've documented that we potentially have access to, that we don't access, and dreaming seems to have access to more realms than we do when we're awake. And so there's no reason why they couldn't have ways of predicting other events, and we just don't listen to that, or it could be that far off in the future these ways of seeing and knowing will become more commonplace, or that we'll access all of the things that we have that are possible to know. But I feel like through dreaming we get glimpses of that, and there are people who dream in a way that is much more advanced than I've ever experienced, where they can go literally into other places, and the indigenous cultures and are known for this, especially particularly skilled dreamers. And I like to keep an open mind about all that, because I think why not? Why can't this be possible? And it makes life more interesting to think about things like this. And so,
And adding to the skilled dreamers, can you just briefly talk about lucid dreams?
yes. So there's many sort of gradations of lucid dreaming. I think that people who are, seen the movies, Inception, for example, about lucid dreaming, have this impression that it's kind of an all or nothing experience, where you wake up in your dreams and suddenly everything is super vivid and you have full control, like my underwater dream. And that is really at the far edge of a continuum, but lucid dreaming can be having inklings that you're dreaming, having that come and go, sort of feathering in out of, oh, this is a dream, having aware that you're dreaming, but really not having any control over what your dream does. So there's variations in awareness, variations in levels of control. And it's fun to practice it, because I think you can develop the skill by doing waking dream exercises like I do with dream work, where I ask people to enter into their dreams and start to let the dream open up more, to look around the dreamscape and see what's there and have an interaction with it. And that sort of bridges the waking dreaming state, so that when I've noticed that when I do that, or when someone I work with does that a lot, that they start to have a more of a bridge between the dreaming waking state as well. And so there's gradations of lucidity. And I think that cultivating some lucidity is really helpful for dream recall, for one. I noticed that when I wake up in my dreams, because I'm so interested in them, I woke up in my dreams a lot when I was writing my book. And I would, rather than try and control anything or do something for myself, I'd go, okay, this is a dream. Now I got to take notes. I got to remember this. I have to pay attention to what's going on. So it enabled me to be the watcher in my dream. And I would remember those dreams very clearly, versus other times when my dreams would be kind of, more fuzzy, and I'd only recollect the very last part of it. So, and then there are people who take lucid dreaming further and go on journeys in their dreams and start to use them for, just asking big questions of this realm and going on journeys to other realms. Some people who feel that a dream shouldn't be messed with, and then when you wake up in a dream, you should be a respectful observer and not try and interfere too much. It's a whole kind of area unto itself. It's utterly fascinating, and there are a number of people that are really experienced lucid dreamers that coach people in that. And so I know Robert Wagoner is one, and Claire Johnson is another, and they're really have made that their focus, is to help people access that lucid dimension.
Now, for the listening audience who have to be spellbound by all the different ways of exploring dreaming, and the benefits of using dreams therapeutically, the different types of dreams, understanding the neuroscience behind dreams, where can people find your book, A Clinician's Guide to Dream Therapy, Implementing Simple and Effective Dream Work?
So it's published by Routledge, so you can get it from the publisher, or if you just it's on Amazon as well. You can search it on Amazon, and or go to my website. There's links to it. My website is my name, Leslie, Leslie, at drleslieellis.com. And there's not just links to the book, but also I have a blog on where I write, just short pieces on all of these kinds of things, and some courses and how to work with your own dreams, and some self-directed courses, just a bunch of resources. And I'm also just very happy to answer people's questions if they contact me. So, because this is a topic, as you can tell, that I dearly love, and yes, I'm happy to share. It's just so much fun.
That's awesome. Well, I'll definitely include the links to your website in the show notes, and encourage people to, obviously buy your book, check out your courses, check out your blog, and any other things you have going on. Leslie, thank you so much for your time. This is fascinating. Loved your book, and let me once again encourage people to check it out. And thank you for being on the podcast.
Oh, it's such a pleasure. I really, really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed your questions and and speaking to you specifically. You're a lovely interviewer.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, let me encourage you to hang out for a few minutes. I'm going to close out this podcast with one of my favorite singer-songwriters, Stuart Davis. And this song is called Fear of Light.